My not so favorite topic of weeding. This is our two pictures from the gardens that I garden in. So on the left is my food edible garden, which is a very, very small part of my yard. This gets full on south sun. You can see on this end, I have herbs. So this is a perennial end of my garden. And then the rest of the garden is devoted to salad. You can see there's a couple old chards in there that I'm still harvesting from, and there's parsley that I'm still harvesting from last year. But it's too cold to put in new stuff yet. I'll probably do that this weekend. And on the right, you'll see the giving garden. This is our church garden that has 31 raised beds. We're This is like cushy gardening, guys. If we have a workshop this summer, we might have one here. 31 raised beds with individual drip lines in them, and nice mulch in between. So it's a pretty much of a dream to be able to garden there. So what is a weed? Well, we all can define weeds. We might have different ideas about what is a weed or what is not. But basically, a weed is a plant that is growing somewhere where you don't want it to grow. And a weed is something that can proliferate amazingly crazy. Yeah, and when my kids would blow dandelion seeds, I would just cringe. You don't want to yell at them, but you just really don't want those seeds everywhere. So weeds, the downside of weeds is that they compete with the resources like sun and water and nutrients. So they're competing with your vegetable plants. So it is really, really to your baby's advantage to remove those weeds or prevent those weeds. So one really nice resource. Oh my goodness. Oh, there it is. This is the applied ecology field guide to weeds of the Willamette Valley. I'll make sure that this gets into your the chat and into your resources. But there are some weeds that are considered invasive. So you really do not want to let those get a stronghold in your yard. You don't want those seeds to be distributed anywhere. You don't want birds and anything else to be getting in there and spreading those around. So if in doubt, do some research. Sometimes it's difficult to identify plants before they start blooming, but as soon as they start blooming and you can identify them, get them out of there. Don't let them go to seed. Oops. So there are so many weeds and so little time. I love this little sign. We need to wage war on weeds, and it's called weed triage. So the first weeds you should get out of the garden are the ones that are going to seed. So the ones that have flowered and they're setting the seed pods and they're going to blow those poofy things all over or spring those poofy things all over. Those are the ones you want to get out as soon as possible. The next layer in your triage is going to be your invasive weeds and grasses. So the things that can start spreading by roots, the crabgrasses and other things like that, they're not going to immediately poof with the seeds, but they're going to cause a problem in the long run. And then everything else. So I did go out and take a picture of a few March weeds. That springy white thing, you guys all know what they are. They're all over. Those little white flowers are diminutive and sweet, but then they make these brown, you can't really see them on here. They haven't developed those seeds yet. They make these brown skinny ends where those flowers were, and you touch them and literally they will spring feet away. So you want to get rid of those before. So I call this weed crisis weeding. I'll go around and I'll just say, we're not weeding anything else. We're doing the crisis weeding. Only get those ones with the white flowers. Just let's spend a few minutes and get those out. So another weed that this one I don't try to identify weeds with Latin names and anything. I don't think they deserve that. So nobody asked me what the names are. I don't know. I'm sure another master gardener could tell you. But these are the yellow ones that make those poofy balls that blow around. So you want to get those out too.
Well, the nice thing about weeding in your vegetable garden is you know what the vegetables are that you're planting. So everything else could be considered a weed. You know, when you inherit a flower garden from someone and the plants are coming up and you're not sure if it's a flower or a weed, then there's a lot more questions. But in your vegetable garden, you know it's a vegetable or it's not a vegetable.
So that's one advantage, I think it was Lynn talking about different ways to seed. There are advantages to seeding in bands or in rows because you put the little stake on the end and you know if these little things come up all in a row, that it's probably your vegetables. You'll see it in the front here. This is a compost pile. I had some really nice compost delivered last summer, and notice all along the edges some weeds. Again, those come up with the poofy seeds, and then the dandelion kinds of things. That's lower down on the triage because I don't see any flower buds on there, so I wouldn't try to get those first. And then the grasses. Again, you want to keep your grasses under control because they will put out seed heads and they will put out runners, and you don't want those going through your vegetable beds. So controlling weeds, you can do that with water management, mowing, using transplants like Lynn talked about. If you have kind of a weedy, seedy bed, if you have well-established plants like the tomato she planted last time, it's going to get a stronger start and not have to compete with the weeds because it's so much bigger to start with. As Candy explained, using cover crops, it not only holds moisture in and can fix nitrogen and provide all the other kinds of benefits, but it also can keep the weeds out because it's out eating them. And landscape fabric is also a possibility. So you'll see here on the left, this is the cover crop is still growing. This was a mix of 3 different kinds of seeds that I got. So sometimes when you're putting in cover crops quite late, like October, you're not sure if you have enough warmth in the season left to get things to germinate. So this has favas, vetch, and Austrian peas. I find that clover, if you wait too long into October, October is often too cold to get clover to germinate. If I'm going to put in clover and I really want to do that, I try to do that in September. You see also here, this has a drip line through this bed, so that's another way to control weeds. When we first started the garden in this giving garden, we didn't have fancy raised beds. So we hired a guy to come and plow the field, and we had one of those kind of sprinklers. And when you just have raw dirt and you plant your little vegetable seeds in there and we water the bejeebers out of it, you get a lot of weeds. It was a battle. It was a constant battle that first couple years getting the weeds down. It was so hard that picking bush beans, you could hardly tell where the bush beans were. There were so many weeds. So another strategy is to mulch. You'll see in the orchard here, all under the drip line, we have wood chips. These wood chips were put down last summer, so you can see there's a little bit of weeds poking through, but nothing like, the rest of the field. The rest of the field does get mowed so that it minimizes the weed seeds that blow around. So the orchard is adjacent to these other raised beds. This is the 3-bin compost system. They're pretty wide. They're about 5 or 6 feet wide. So we wanted to be able to have enough at the end of the season. This garden produces a lot of compost. You can see here in this bed, it was the end of the compost. It got emptied out, but you can see it's pretty weedy. And you really don't want weed seeds in your compost. So these were probably, we don't normally put weeds into the compost bins. We only put vegetable matter in there. The leafy vegetable matter, we don't try to put seedy matter in there. But you can see, since that wasn't covered, the weed seeds blew in and started growing. So we'll have to go through there. The middle bin had the bulk of our fall composting, and as we layered it, we watered it and layered it, green, brown water, green, brown water. and it was up over the top of the edges, and you can see how much it's decomposed because you can tell by the tarp it's really sunken in. But by putting the tarp over there, we've retained the moisture in that bin, and we've also kept the weed seeds out. So there are a ton of options for weeding tools. I thought I had a picture on here. I don't know what happened. I'm a really simple weeder. All I need is a glove and a bin and a little hand trowel, like one of these kind of hand trowels. A lot of people like to use the 40-40s and other things, but I have this red plastic handled trowel that it's my constant companion. And gloves, I can never have too many pairs of gloves. You want really good gloves. I prefer, if I'm going to be hand weeding, I prefer the gloves with the that thicker rubber stuff on there. They're too thick for seeding or doing fine things, but I like the heavier gloves for weeding. Anybody else weigh in? What are your favorite weeding tools?
Yeah, I agree with you. I like a hand trowel. But I also really like, I have this this light, long-handled hoe, because when I plant things and they're still pretty small, I can just like lightly scrape the soil around the young plants, and I can cover a bigger area. Like there's only 2 of us gardening a pretty big garden, and so the hoe is kind of efficient for getting at stuff when it's small. So I like that. And my husband always sharpens it. He either to, like runs the blade against the sharpening blade against it. So that is very helpful.
And I have a steak knife that I use for those long tap roots that won't come up. I just slice them 4 or 5 inches down with the steak knife, and then they come up very easily.
That's good. Yeah, I've gotten a number of tools, not necessarily for weeding, but from estate sales. So when I have more landscape plants, not so much vegetables, when they're root bound, you know, the what are those big pokey fork things that you would use on a roast? They're pretty heavy duty. I use those to loosen roots and things like that. I imagine they'd be good for working on weeds too.
One of my
Oh, go ahead.
One of my favorite. Whoops. One of my favorite ones is there I go. One of my favorite ones is the dandelion digger, because it works very well at getting the deeper roots.